I want to begin by thanking each and every one of you for the opportunity to be here today and for just the glorious ride out here. I hope that you also experienced the glory of the world as you drove out here today. It was one of the most beautiful days that I've seen in a long time. I also want to thank the Marshall families whose friendship I think has been instrumental in bringing me here today, the two Marshall families, and also to your former Reverend Cynthia Landrum, who has been a good friend of mine through our participation in the Jackson Area Ministerial Association, which is good fellowship and good work together to make the community a better place. I have to add a few words about myself to help you understand my presentation, understand what I'm speaking from. First of all, I have to add to Gretchen's kind remarks at the beginning. She mentioned 3 of our 4 children. We have an adopted daughter, and she has given us 2 additional grandchildren, so that's a very important part of who I am today, is a grandfather of 7. She mentioned that I'm a member of Temple Beth Israel, and I want to emphasize that I'm not representing any individual stream of Judaism, nor necessarily the official, because there is none, viewpoint of Temple Beth Israel. I am going to present to you a synthesis of various streams of Judaism. I want to emphasize that I'm not a member of ordained clergy. I am kind of what you might call Temple Beth Israel's Gretchen Marshall. I am certified as a tour guide by the State of Israel, which is not religiously sanctioned, but it's rigorously enforced. You learn a broad base of components of Judaism, also of Christianity, history, and culture. I was brought up as a member of what's known as a conservative stream of Judaism, which is somewhat middle of the road. And I belong to what is called Reform, which is less than literal and much more liberal branch of the religion. The first of the holidays, I'll lead into with a brief piece of music to give you a sense of our experience. It's a little bit more formal, the version that you're going to hear, than the version that we use, but I think it's lovely at any rate. That would be track 13. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. That's all good, too. That's fine. You can just let it run. Don't worry about it. It's all good. It's a little bit more formal, so I asked them to kind of clip out the formal lead-in. This should be.
Kinus
This is a prayer seeking forgiveness. It's called Kol Nidre. It is perhaps the most significant of prayers that is said on the eve of Yom Kippur. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Actually, I'm going to be talking about two holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah, which has probably become part of the awareness of the American Jewish community, has evolved over time. The earliest recognition of it occurs in Leviticus 23, and then it was not called the New Year, and it was not called Rosh Hashanah even. The Torah refers to this day as Yom Truah, the day of the shofar blowing. The name Rosh Hashanah was first mentioned in a book of commentaries on the Torah, which dates from about 300. The book is called the Talmud, and Rosh Hashanah means the head of the year. Yom Kippur does not appear by the name of appear in the Torah either. It appears to have been commemorated only since about 400 BC. Traditionally, the date is associated with Moses descending from Mount Sinai with the second tablets of stone with the Ten Commandments on them. This was a second set which replaced the first set which Moses destroyed when he descended from the mountain and saw people from the children of Israel worshiping the golden calf. So, in a sense, Yom Kippur is a second chance holiday celebration. I will be using an analogy of a court trial to demonstrate the inseparableness of the two holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which brings us now to the first name of Yom Kippur, which is the day of the shofar blowing. The shofar is a ram's horn, such as this, which kind of functions like your bell, but a little bit more aggressive, which is used as a trumpet to galvanize our attention to the significance of the days, much as a judge might use a gavel to bring a court to order. The shofar sound is loud, and it's demanding, and one cannot ignore it. It's blown over 100 times during the two holidays. I cannot do it. We're fortunate to have someone who can. It takes skill and it takes breath. Yom Kippur is called the Yom Hadin, which means the Day of Judgment. It is also called Yom HaZikaron, Day of Remembrance, when God recalls our past deeds. The notion of sin seems to span many, if not all, religions and cultures. Issues of sin do not occupy the same place in Judaism as they typically do in Christianity, as do members of most religious faiths. Jews view ourselves, and others do, as imperfect and subject to greater powers or a greater power. In Judaism, unlike many streams in Christianity, original sin is not part of our conception of mankind. We do not believe in prior contamination from which we need to seek grace or intercession for forgiveness. Rather, the traditional view of mankind is each of us possesses potential for good or for evil. Our ethos is based on how these tendencies are utilized or how they are constrained to direct our actions and determine whether we will or we won't sin. Rosh Hashanah can be considered to be a time when we, as defense attorneys, present our case in a non-juried trial. On intervening days, we may present additional pleas, and on Yom Kippur, we make concluding arguments and receive our sentences. Just in conventional court cases, there are categories of crime. We consider there to be two kinds of sinful behavior. One against our I can't say fellow man anymore, can I? Shows my age. Fellow person, how's that? Okay. And those sins which are against God. Examples of the first would be if a person were to borrow someone's garden tool and forget to return it, or cause someone bodily harm. An example of the later is when we make commitments to God or vows to God and fail to keep them. In the case of a sin against a fellow, repentance and forgiveness are action-based. We must seek out that person, make amends, and receive forgiveness. Also in our prayer, we have a collective prayer called the Al-Khet for forgiveness for those deeds which have been done by others in the imperfect society of our world, deeds which might not have occurred had we been more successful in making the world a better place. You see, it sounds very much like your mission statement, and our goals are just totally aligned. We consider making the world a better place to be an ethical responsibility which we pursue year-round. In the words of Deuteronomy 16, and I'll say a couple of words in Hebrew here, tzedek tirdof, which in free translation means you shall rigorously pursue righteousness. Now, let me consider for a moment sins against God. Though the two holidays originate in biblical times, our prayer services have accumulated about 3,000 years of experience, and much of our service is impacted heavily by the horrors experienced by the Jewish people during the Middle Ages. The central prayer of the evening service is called Kol Nidre, and that's the prayer that you heard briefly on the loudspeaker. It recalls the dilemma of Jews who were forced by sword, fire, or water to renounce their Judaism to convert to Christianity. Repenting of this, Jews were faced with the tragedy of being cut off from their religion and their co-religionists. The Kol Nidre prayer was instituted to enable release from the vow and for having made it. The release is only relevant to our relationship with God and has nothing to do with our relationships with fellow human beings. If we err in relationships with human beings, we have to make amends, be it a personal amends or a business amends. Another aspect of Yom Kippur, other than cleansing of sins, is that of Yom Hadin, which is the Day of Judgment. A common Yom Kippur greeting is, "May you be inscribed in the Book of Life." According to tradition, a person's fate for the coming year hangs in the balance between life and death. Reflecting the uncertainty of life, we recite a prayer called the Utana Tokef, a prayer of which I will recite a very few lines. They are pretty grim, but they reflect some of the experience that we experienced in the past. Fortunately, we live in the United States where things are much more right. On Rosh Hashanah, it is inscribed. On Yom Kippur, it is sealed. How many shall pass away, and how many shall be born? Who shall perish by water, and who by fire? Who by sword, and who by wild beast? Who by famine, and who by thirst? It goes on, but I'm not going to read the rest of it. The last lines I will read, however, because what it says is, by repentance, prayer, and righteousness, you can avert the severe decree. Not all Jews today believe in an interventionist God who determines all things. Yet in the last two lines of our prayer lie our hope. We may, through our actions and deeds, have lives of health, peace, and prosperity. Thank you for your kind attention, and if you have any questions, I would be delighted to answer them. Yeah.
So you do go to people and ask forgiveness?
Absolutely.
I think that's beautiful.
I even long distance, And I know we've had some discussion about whether you can use social media to ask for forgiveness. And there are divided, there are divided opinions. But I don't do a general blanket Facebook shout out, but I will send personal communications to friends on the other side of the ocean who live in Israel and ask them for forgiveness. I have not been a good friend to them or otherwise wronged them. Yeah.
Little did I know, I was sitting next to the star. I just thought you were dropping in to check out the church like I did last week.
No, we're just fellow we're just fellow bikers.
You and your VSAs and so forth.
Right.
So, a preacher, a Methodist preacher in Augusta, Georgia, once told me. Can you hear me? Okay, you can't. All right, if you can't hear me, you can't hear me. Here we go. Perfectly fine. Here we go.
About a hand distance from your mouth. That's a general.
That's about right. You don't know that I used this microphone for 35 years in rock and roll, made a lot of money. Anyway, preacher in Augusta, Georgia once told me that Christianity had about 3,200, give or take, plus or minus, denominations. And I know some of those denominations will be at each other's throats over nothing. But yet they have to, it's this way, it's not your way. About how many branches of Judaism are there? I know there's Reformed, and there's Hasidic, and more. Can you tell me about how many, let's call them branches, or you tell me what to call them?
That's a wonderful question. I think I am familiar with the reference that the minister used to give you that information. I think that there was a survey of religions in the United States in Time magazine when I was young, a couple of minutes ago. And in terms of Judaism, there are three major streams, Orthodox, conservative, and Reform, and they're in progressive level of informality. Mm-hmm. And the Orthodox are more traditional, and within the Orthodox stream, there are a fair number, I don't think it's been counted, of different communities which are somewhat different in their mm-hmm. orientation.
Mm-hmm. Does being in a different subdivision make two Jews argue with each other?
Well,
the same way you might find in...
That's a lovely question. Now, there's an old Jewish kind of joke which says every community has two synagogues, places of worship, the one that you go to and the one that you don't go to. But my grandmother was actually the secretary for both congregations. So it really depends. Matters of faith are very intense. And in the best of situations, we understand and respect one another's perspectives, and we hope that it will be that way.
I was told many years ago that I was in therapy for divorce, that I forgive too quickly and too easily. Couldn't that be normative? Couldn't that be that Jews maybe are more, I was brought up with more of a Jewish tradition. And, how do you know how quickly to forgive somebody? Have you ever thought of that?
That is a subtle question. In our tradition, if a person comes with sincere repentance and a request for forgiveness, it is the hope that the person will forgive the wrongdoer. There are some very complicated discussions about that. And, let me tell you a bit about one of our religious writings. It's called the Talmud. And it is actually a set of conversations about what should be done based on how you can understand the Torah. And it has conversations which are still going on today, because there have been subsequent books with conversations, and we're still trying to work that out. So I guess that no one really knows, but I think that in terms of our own well-being, holding grudges forever is probably not all that good. Does that help you at all? Well, thank you.